Welcome to worship with the Laverne Church of the Brethren. My name is Amanda Bennett, and I'm on staff here at the church. We extend a special welcome today to those of you who provide mothering love to others, whatever gender you are, and regardless of whether you have biological children. The world is a better place because of you. We would love to know that you're joining us today in worship, and if you haven't done so already, please fill out the connection card on our website at lavernecob.org. It's under the Connect menu option. On May 12th at 8 p.m., our church will be joining the combined choirs of Cal Poly Pomona and their chamber orchestra with guest instrumentalists to perform Fauré's Requiem. Tickets for this concert cost $15 or $10 for students and can be purchased at the door. For advanced ticket sales, you can go to our website at lavernecob.org and click on the Connect option and then the midweek group option. Please mark your calendar for Sunday, June 5th for a special farewell celebration for our beloved senior pastor, Susan Boyer. Join us for worship and then stay for brunch, which will include a special program to celebrate the 20 years of blood, sweat, and ministry tears that Susan has graciously given to us. You're invited to bring a card of gratitude for Susan on June 5th as well. We want to send Susan off into the world of retirement generously. So if you'd like to contribute to a collective gift for Susan, there are several ways to do so. Cash or check donations can be delivered to the church office with the note Susan's gift in the memo line. Donations can also be made through Zelle. Our contact email is lvcobgiving@gmail.com, and you can type the phrase gift for Susan in the note section on Zelle. And finally, donations can be made through PayPal, which can be accessed right off our homepage. When using PayPal, select the drop-down option, Gift for Susan. And now let us continue in a spirit of love as we worship our mothering God. Please stand if you're able for a call to worship. We have come to worship God, who loves us without condition, who knows us even better than we know ourselves, whose presence never leaves us. Come, let us worship God, who gives us like a mother hen. Will you join me in prayer? Mother God, each of us enters this day and this space with different emotions. Some of us experience joy in today. Some of us experience grief in today. Some of us experience indifference in today. May we be gentle with one another, and may we welcome your tender and fierce love into this place and into our hearts. Amen.
The Laverne Church of the Brethren continues the work of Jesus peacefully, simply, together. We create a Christian community called by Christ to be inclusive, caring, and peace-minded. We affirm that people of any race, ethnic identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, age, economic status, faith tradition, or life situation are welcome in our congregation. We believe in compassionate service, stewardship of creation, respect for diversity, and nonviolent reconciliation for differences among all people, nations, and faith traditions. We claim no creed but the New Testament, as exemplified by the life of Christ. We strive to follow the way of Jesus, and through these efforts, we seek to grow ever closer to the mind and heart of God. That is our mission statement here at the Laverne Church of the Brethren. These are the values and practices that guide our life together. For those of you who are part of our church through the wonders of YouTube, we welcome you into the mission of this congregation. What we do together matters. To that end, I want to give you an update of where we are financially. At the end of April, we were almost $40,000 behind giving towards our expenses. We need your help to continue to offer the ministries of this church. If you join us virtually but have not yet donated, I invite you to consider doing so. You can donate to the church via PayPal right off of our homepage at lavernecob.org or through Zelle on your own online banking. Our email for Zelle is lvcobgiving@gmail.com, or you can mail a check to the Laverne Church of the Brethren at 2425 East Street, Laverne, California, 91750. We're grateful for any help you can give in keeping our message alive in the world.
For the earth mothers are on your side. For the earth mothers are on your side. Then rest easy, child, and in their love abide. You can trust that you're going with the tide. But if the earth mothers march against you, if the earth mothers march against you, turn around, son, and join the other side. Then rest easy in the knowing that you're going with the tide. For the good of all creatures is their care, and the good of all children is the burden that they bear. They look down the generations at the future we must share, and the strength of their goodness is the tide. If all the earth mothers are on your side, if all the earth mothers are on your side, then rest easy, child, and in their love abide. You can trust that you're going with the tide. You can trust that you're going with the tide. Then rest easy in the knowing that you're going with the tide.
I'll be reading out of Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 through 20. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. They built supply cities, Pithom and Ramesses, for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on the Israelites and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in every kind of field labor. They were ruthless in all the tasks that were imposed on them. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, "When you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, she shall live." But the midwives feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this and allowed the boys to live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them." So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong.
I want to invite you today to join me on a journey around the world and through time, for history and what is happening presently has something to say to us in this sanctuary today on Mother's Day. The book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, ends with the story of Joseph. The story of Joseph has enough intrigue in it that it's made into a Broadway musical. Joseph in the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Joseph, sold into slavery by his very own brothers, becomes Pharaoh's right-hand man and saves Egypt and his own family from starving to death during a famine. Musical ends with the whole cast singing about what a hero Joseph is. Go, 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 Joseph. Like, you remember that? But if you haven't read the story for yourself, or you weren't here on the Sunday that Pastor Tom talked about about Joseph, you may not know how Joseph organized this feat. Here's what he did. Before the famine, Joseph had Pharaoh save up grain. When the famine hit, the people came to Pharaoh begging for food because Pharaoh had food. Joseph made them pay cash for it. Next year, when the people came again because they were out of money, Joseph traded them their livestock for grain. Then he traded them for their land. And finally, he made them sell themselves into slavery so that they could eat and feed their families. They could stay on the land, but they had to farm it and give the harvest to 1/5 of the harvest to Pharaoh. Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his own brothers, who becomes Pharaoh's second in command, turns around and makes sharecroppers of all of the people of Egypt and Canaan and his own family. The book of Genesis, remember, begins with the story of creation, a story about God's original design a story about how we all come from common parents. We are all siblings related to each other. But by the end of the book of Genesis, Joseph has structured a society in which Pharaoh is divine and everyone else is his slave. What could go wrong? The second book of the Bible, the book of Exodus, begins by telling us that Joseph and his brothers are all dead, but the family line continues in Egypt. Exodus chapter 1, we hear these words, "Now a new king arose who did not know Joseph." It's an ominous line. It's a story that it's about to take a turn. The new Pharaoh is a tyrant who feels no obligation to Joseph or his descendants. He doesn't care that once upon a time Joseph saved the day. For the new Pharaoh, Joseph's family is a threat to his power. Besides, there's just too many of them. What do tyrants do when they feel their power threatened by others? Over and over again throughout history, we have seen what tyrants and dictators do to people they find a threat. They name them enemies, and they begin to exterminate them. Pharaoh starts his campaign by using rhetoric to make the Hebrews the enemy. Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, they will join with our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. If we don't stop them, they're going to become the majority and then end up wiping all of us out. In 1929, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin decided to collectivize agriculture in the USSR. All farmers were to give up their land and join collective farms to mass produce crops. Wealthier peasants and anyone who resisted, they were immediately deported. This move to collective farming led to a reduction in production, and a famine ensued. Now, Stalin was particularly angry at the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian Communist Party. They wouldn't fall into line. So farms, villages, and towns in Ukraine were placed on a blacklist. They were prevented from receiving any food and were forbidden to leave the Ukrainian Republic in search of food. And while people across Ukraine starved, the Soviets' demand for production increased, and police ransacked the homes of peasants and took everything edible, from their crops to personal food supplies to their pets. People literally died in the streets of starvation. Between 1931 and 1934, 5 million people across the USSR died of starvation. 3.9 million of those were Ukrainians. This man-made famine in Ukraine is referred to as Holodomor, and it is derived from two Ukrainian words, the words for hunger and extermination. For 50 years following Holodomor, the Kremlin denied that this famine even occurred. But the Ukrainians knew better. Holodomor lives in Ukrainian public memory. On the fourth Saturday of November, Ukrainians pause for Holodomor Remembrance Day. Stalin generated so much resentment that he achieved the opposite of his goal. He solidified Ukrainian nationalism. Let's go back to Egypt. Pharaoh, afraid of the Hebrew people, who were already his sharecroppers, he had them hauled away to do forced labor. Surprised him to learn that oppression didn't seem to stop them from having more babies. So in order to break their spirits, he ordered that they should be treated ruthlessly. It says in Exodus that the Egyptians made their Hebrew lives bitter with hard service. Enslavement can break the spirit, but it doesn't reduce the numbers. Pharaoh was clear that something had to be done to stop the population growth of the Israelites, so he sends for the 2 head Hebrew midwives who were helping to birth these Hebrew children. The names of the midwives were Puah and Shiphrah. Now, women aren't always or often named in the Bible, so if they're named, pay close attention. Pharaoh calls Puah and Shiphrah to him in secret because genocide is better spoken of in whispered tones. He directs them, when you attend the births of Hebrew women, if it's a male child, kill it. Pharaoh feels so omnipotent. He thought he could instruct these 2 little ladies to do his dirty work, but instead he only solidified the resistance. Puah and Shiphrah left the palace with directions from Pharaoh, directions they had absolutely no intent of following. They didn't kill any children. These were women tasked with helping to bring life into the world. They refused to be agents of death on behalf of the empire. When Pharaoh learns that his direction is not being followed, he summons Puah and Shiphrah to him again to account for themselves. And they respond by feeding right into his prejudicial stereotype about immigrants. With innocent expressions on their faces, they say, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They're strong and hardy, and they give birth before we ever even arrive. Seeing that he's not going to be able to convince them to do his work, he turns to their Egyptian neighbors who are also enslaved by the empire. If you see any baby boys born to Hebrew women, I deputize you to pick them up and throw them into the Nile River. Pharaoh spurs ethnic hatred among the enslaved, and then he directs his people to join him in genocide. Back to Ukraine. We have watched with horror as Vladimir Putin has unleashed war on Ukraine and its people, claiming that Russia cannot possibly feel safe, develop, and exist with the constant threat of Ukraine breathing down their necks. Putin launched his invasion on February 24th, telling the people of Russia that Ukraine, their neighbor and their relative, is their enemy. He announced that his goal was to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. And then recently, Putin said, the Russian people will always be able to distinguish true patriots from scum and traitors, and will simply spit them out like a gnat that accidentally flew into their mouths, spit them out on the pavement. I am convinced that such a natural and necessary self-purification of society will only strengthen our country, our solidarity, cohesion, and readiness to respond to any challenges. Thousands of people, both Russians and Ukrainians, have died. Towns and cities lie in ruins. 13 million people have been displaced so far. Back in Egypt, where every male child is in danger of being thrown to the crocodiles, a Hebrew woman named Jochebed gives birth to a baby boy. She names him Moses. For 3 months, she hides him from her neighbors, and then, in fear of his precious life, she makes a basket for him and sets him to float among the reeds of the Nile River. Moses' older sister, Miriam, stands close by as a sentry. It just so happens that Pharaoh's own daughter comes down to the river to bathe and sees this basket among the reeds. She tells her maid to fetch it for her, and lo and behold, inside is a little crying baby boy. She gathers that child into her arms and she says, it must be a Hebrew child. Miriam sidles up next to Pharaoh's daughter and says, "You know, I know a woman who could nurse this child for you." "Please go get her," Pharaoh's daughter says. And that's how Moses' mother becomes Moses' wet nurse, and how Moses, a Hebrew child, found himself living in the palace as Pharaoh's adopted grandson. Moses, who would eventually lead his people out of slavery and away from Pharaoh. Yelena Osipova is a 77-year-old pensioner from St. Petersburg, Russia, and she's an artist and an activist. She's among the last living people to have survived the Nazi siege on Leningrad. Seeing what Putin was doing to her neighbors in Ukraine, she made 2 signs and went to stand in a public square. On one side, she had written, "Son, don't go to war. Soldier, drop your weapons and you will be a real hero. Don't shoot." The crowd stood around her and shouted, "No war," as a dozen Russian police officers were sent to arrest this dangerous, nasty woman. In another part of Russia, 2 mothers and their 5 children went to the Ukrainian embassy to place flowers. The children were holding posters. One said, "No to war." The other one had a Ukrainian flag and a Russian flag, and they were connected by a heart. These dangerous women and their little children spent a night behind bars in Moscow. We've seen countless videos of women in Ukraine and confronting Russian forces, or rushing people to safety, or taking care of infants in bomb shelters. Did you see the clip of the Ukrainian woman trying to hand a Russian officer some sunflower seeds? Sunflowers are the national flower of Ukraine. She urges him to put them in his pocket so that the sunflowers will grow when he dies. In 1870, Anna Jarvis of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the United States, an abolitionist, began campaigning for a Mother's Day of Peace. She wanted to form a Congress of women to promote peace, and she wrote a proclamation. "Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We women of one country will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence indicate possession. As men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of council. Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead. Let them then solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, each learning after his own time the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God. In the name of womanhood and of humanity, I earnestly ask that a General Congress of Women without limit of nationality may be appointed and held at some place deemed most convenient and at the earliest period consistent with its objects, to promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interests of peace. Within her very own lifetime, Anna Jarvis was disgusted by how this day of peace, for which she had fervently campaigned, had just become a commercial opportunity. She wanted a Congress of women. She denounced what it had become, and she even filed lawsuits against any profiteers using the phrase Mother's Day. Today is Mother's Day, and we will spend $32 billion sending gifts to our mothers. Anna Jarvis is rolling over in her grave, and you can hear her yelling at us, begging us, people of all genders, to become the Shifras and the Puas of our time, to join Yelena Osipova and the women and children of Ukraine and Russia who are calling for an end to the war, to refuse to let our dictators and our tyrants ease their egos and frighten us into submission, to stop allowing them to use us to murder each other. Pua, Shifra, Jochebed, Miriam, Pharaoh's daughter, Yelena, and Anna remind us we come from common parents, and they are calling out to us today. You are more powerful than you know. Join the resistance and become instruments of peace. Amen.
From falsehood to truth, from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead us from hate to love, from war
there is hope. We share common parents, so join all the earth mothers. The earth is filled with our siblings. We are more powerful than we realize. We can be love. We can be peace. So let us stand up, speak out, join hands, and demand that hatred, division, and oppression be banished from every land and every heart. Amen.